And good afternoon and welcome to UK Column Live from our Plymouth, England studios. It's raining outside, but don't worry about that. It's a warm welcome from myself, Brian Gerrish, and Mike Robinson. And we've got an interesting news slot for you today. Obviously, the mainstream press and media are continuing to focus on the Olympic Games, the closing ceremony, the legacy of the Olympic Games, future support for the Olympic Games. They're now talking about Rio, we're talking about supporting athletes, we're talking about all the wonders of the Olympic Games. But the UK Column Live is interested in what is actually happening behind the scenes, what's really going on in the news. And we've got a number of topics today, serious stuff, of course. Events are still progressing in the Middle East, and we're seeing a ramping up of the rhetoric against Iran. We've got major problems in Syria, and on the financial and banking front, we're really beginning to see the international banking community for what it is, a fraudulent cabal. So we've got a number of interesting items to go through with you today, including a fascinating little film clip of some drones, which we're going to have a look at shortly. But the first article is really Israel and what's happening with the Middle East. And what have you been looking at for that, Mike?
Well, lots of anti-attack in Iran rhetoric coming from people from within the Israeli establishment. Yeah. There definitely seems to be a split. Certainly the Israeli media is promoting it as a split between Ehud Olmert, the last Israeli Prime Minister, and Netanyahu. And Olmert's just been in the United States giving presentations saying basically, you know, this is insane to even consider an attack in Iran, and this attack is absolutely back on the agenda. So we're talking about within weeks, in inverted commas. Yep. So we don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but Netanyahu and Barak are absolutely pushing for it again. The Israeli daily Ynet, that's the online version of one of the biggest daily newspapers, right, is playing this up as a faction fight within Israel, attempts within Israel to get Netanyahu to stop his moves towards Iran, and basically warning that this is not like attacking Iraq as they did a number of years ago. We've got him. We've got IDF top IDF personnel coming out and saying this is the Israeli Defense Force, saying this is nuts. And we've got various commentators in Haaretz. I mean, the one that I'm particularly going to mention here is Amir Oren. If I just put that up. That's him there. Now he's been basically warning that if President Obama doesn't speak out, or at least the Obama administration doesn't speak out right now to prevent Israel from doing this, then it's going to be too late. You know, the quote is, "Without clear statements at the highest levels, publicly, not half-heartedly behind closed doors, the impression will remain that the Americans have come to terms with such an operation." He's talking about an attack on Iran. By the time they deny that this is the case, it might be too late. That's basically what's going on within Israel. Definitely a fight within the Israeli establishment about whether they're going to press ahead with this, but it's clear that Netanyahu definitely wants to do that.
Yeah, of course there was a lot going on several months ago, which we actually started to report in the UK column, because we'd had Liam Fox, who'd been getting involved. We've had senior British military in talks with the Israelis. So there was a lot actually going on behind the scenes, which was not being fully reported in the British mainstream press. And of course, for many people, one of the worrying statements by Mr. Cameron is that he's continued to pledge his unshakable support for Israel. And
well, I mean, I would say that this guy is saying that the Obama administration needs to say something. The British government needs to say something as well. You know, we cannot afford a further escalation of what's going on in the Middle East, and this would be about as far as big an escalation as you could imagine, really.
Yeah, and of course we got the situation at the moment, which David Cameron has gone off on holiday, or just about to go off on holiday. So who have we got in charge of the country while he's away? We've got the Foreign Secretary, who is a man who's consistently pushed to William Hague, who's pushed to ramp up the action in Syria. So at the moment, when we ask the question of which of the British politicians are actually batting for Britain and which of them are actually batting for a totally different international agenda, it's sometimes difficult to see.
Yeah.
But there's been a particularly good article in The Independent, which we'll just bring up on screen here. Robert Fisk, in quite a detailed article, and well done to The Independent for producing this. There's some very, very interesting analysis about what's going on in Syria. Mr. Fisk is pointing out that it's not simply that you have a group of people fighting for independence and trying to overturn a dictatorship. You've got a number of very different groups operating in the country, and he is also highlighting the fact that what we've got is policy being run through the Western allies, as he calls them, but in particular Britain and America, where the clear aim is to break Iran by actually using the troubles in Syria. So we haven't unfortunately got time to give you more detail on that article in the show, but it's extremely well written. The analysis is very good, and we'd encourage viewers to go and have a read of that independent article. So, well, we're on the subject of military capability, and drones in my mind seem to come somewhere in that field. What have you discovered about these things?
Well, this was a Mail article at the weekend, and I just thought I would show this is a promotional video from Thales for basically one of the drones that's being considered for use in the UK. So we'll talk through this, but the Mail article said, "Spy in the sky drones to patrol Britain's shores for terrorists, smugglers and illegal immigrants." It said that the European Commission is to spend £260 million on the Eurosur project, which includes the Mediterranean coast being patrolled by surveillance drones, and British defence firms are testing sophisticated sense and avoid systems and unmanned aerial vehicles over the Irish Sea. And one of the unmanned aerial vehicles that they're talking about is this one, which is which is from Thales, and basically, you know, what this video is demonstrating is how easy it is to set up and operate. It's really quite amazing. What we have covered the potential use of drones in the UK in a number of past issues of the UK column, and really this, I think we've got to see this as a major threat to our civil liberties.
Well, what's very interesting about this is that we're talking about covering coastal areas. Of course, both the Labour and Conservative governments have gone flat out to get rid of all of our Coast Guard facilities. So on one hand, we've been stripping out jobs for people to actually watch, not only from a safety aspect, but of course the Coast Guard has also traditionally helped to keep an eye on boat movements and who's coming in and out of the country. And now we're replacing it with a drone system. And the other thing that's been happening in the background is that members of the government have been stating that as part of the Olympic legacy, we definitely need to relax border control. So we're seeing mention of the Schengen Agreement, which was where the European Union drastically relaxed border controls. And we're now being told that we, the British, need to do this further. And in particular, we need to be inviting in more Chinese and Russian visitors to the country. But if you work in the UK column offices with the other volunteers here, one of the things that we are getting constant reports about is the rise of foreign mafia cells within I was going to say major British cities, but I think I'll change that to British cities, because at the moment it's quite clear that the border agency has lost control of who's coming into the country. So once again, we've got this totally confused mixed message. We're relaxing border controls, but now we need these drones.
Well, this is the classic problem reaction solution, isn't it? They relax the border controls in order to create the problem.
Yeah.
They get the reaction from the public. This needs to be dealt with, and their solution is to impose this kind of draconian surveillance on us all.
Yeah.
Takes the CCTV agenda to a new level, really. And I mean, one of the interesting comments in the Mail article here is that the accident rate for drones is already lower than that for small single-engine private aircraft. So, you know, I think there should be some concern about how safe these things are. I mean, we know that the Texas police were testing their drones because they're going through a pilot phase for taking on drones for running surveillance on Texas civilian population.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and they've already crashed theirs. They are effectively remote controlled, and you know,
the key thing is who is going to be operating these drones, and where is the data going? This is always the key issue. And of course, we have another major French arms company which is now getting a finger in the pie with surveillance of British citizens, following hot on the heels, of course, of Siemens, who operate a lot of the CCTV systems around our railway stations.
Yeah.
Interesting times. Okay, well, the clock's moving on, so we should as well. The next story that we've got here concerns Sir David Walker, who is the man who's now moved into Barclays Bank. If we can just pop that up on the screen,
sure.
Mike.
Keep talking.
Yeah, so here we have him. Of course, he's a suited gentleman of the city. This is the man that's taken over from Marcus Agius in order to deal with the problems of the fixing of interest rates, which of course the average person on the streets would regard as fraudulent activity by the banks. And so this gentleman has just been in post for really a few days, and he's come up with some interesting comments, because essentially he believes that the problems in the bank are all the result of requirements by us, the public, to have free banking. And this is what he said. He said that mis-selling dodgy interest rate swap deals to small companies and other revelations which have outraged the public was simply the consequence of not charging for bank accounts. And then he's added that because the banks are not charging, it drives them into this sort of position. Now, of course, we need a little bit more definition here, because this sort of position is the fact that the banks have been indulging in criminal activity by fixing interest rates and thereby defrauding both individuals, small companies, and indeed anybody in the country who's using the banks.
So it's our fault that they're a bunch of criminals?
Well, I think this fits in very well with politicians who we've been through the saga that the politicians can fiddle their expenses to the average person on the streets. That's fraud and a criminal activity. And here we have banking people brought in supposedly to clean up Barclays and other mainstream banks, and what we're now starting to see is a blurring of the whole problem in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think that if there are members of the audience out there today who are thinking to themselves, what can we do about this, we need to start asking our MPs when we are going to see key players within the banking industry brought into the courts. Police, I think, certainly need to do something here, because this affects all of us. So keep your eye on this wonderful gentleman that's been brought in to clean up Barclays.
So his first task in Barclays is going to be to appoint a new chief executive to replace Bob Diamond.
Indeed, yeah.
So it's just going to be interesting to see who he chooses.
Well, it is. But he's got his feet under the table. He's still got his other directorships. He's now going to be earning £750,000 a year.
Plus perks.
Plus perks. And meanwhile, the man who was chairman whilst all these problems and irregularities took place, Mr. Agius is still advising the BBC Trust on how to run the BBC. So we think that it's time for the British public to start digging in to what's really happening behind the scenes. We can follow on from that, and I'm going to say well done, the Mirror, because the Mirror was the only newspaper that flagged up a little bit about the Osborne family. And this was an article which has appeared in the Mirror today, which has pointed out that George Osborne's parents are going to be keeping their £15 million home on the market, and they're buying another £10 million one, which they can do. They don't appear to need a dodgy bank mortgage to do that. But the point is that we're now dealing with politicians who are themselves millionaires, and thus they are totally out of phase with the British public and what's actually happening. And this isn't a coincidence. We've seen Blair talking about getting an elite into positions of power. And for the UK column, it certainly seems that what's actually taking place around us at the moment is that we have these unaccountable elitist politicians doing as they please.
Yeah.
So well done there to the Mirror. I've chosen this man, George Soros, as a key part of the news today, because wherever we look at the moment, we're seeing this twisted story being put through by the government that there is no money. There is no money for the National Health Service, there's no money for schools, there's no money for the care of old people, there's no money for job seekers, there is money for the Olympics, and when we delve into the background we find billionaires like George Soros who are manipulating billions if not trillions of pounds, and clearly they have key members of the political arena in Britain and America in their pockets. But what's special about George Soros, well, the news on Saturday was that he's got engaged. He's got engaged to a young lady called Tamiko Bolton, who's 40. George Soros is 82, so we wish him the best of luck with that. But the key point is that all that has been reported in the mainstream press is his engagement. But if we take a little bit of a look deeper into George Soros, we start to find that he has fingers in all sorts of pies. And in particular, he is running an absolutely vast network of change agents. So these are charities and these are non-governmental organisations that are all driving to achieve change in society. If we can just pop back to that slide, Mike. The key thing here is that if we do analysis, and this is only part of the sums of money that Mr. George Soros is manipulating, $1.9 billion being put into change of society, change of political agenda, both in the UK and America. And there is no doubt from research that the UK column is doing at the moment that we can find George Soros's hand behind many parts of the Labour and Conservative big society agenda, which of course is itself based on a subversive change agent called Saul Alinsky. So if viewers are interested in where the power really lies, do have a look at George Soros. Of course, we can congratulate him on his engagement, but what we're really interested in is where his billions are being used to manipulate our lives. So where does that bring us? I think we've got a gentleman here, Liam Halligan.
Liam Halligan. Well, at the weekend he wrote an article in the Telegraph. There he is, and he was basically not only talking about Glass-Steagall, but talking about the Pecora Commission.
Right. Should we just define that for viewers and listeners?
Basically, we've discussed Glass-Steagall before, which is the separation of the retail and investment banks. What he has noticed is that one of the real sort of American sort of anti-Glass-Steagall, I mean, basically helped repeal the legislation in America in the late 1990s. A guy called Weiss has come out and said that really that was the thing that brought on the one act which brought on the entire financial collapse.
Right.
Now, of course, if there was any morality or any sort of standards within the banking system, if they weren't all a bunch of criminals, then you wouldn't need legislation like Glass-Steagall in the first place. So basically what Glass-Steagall there is Glass-Steagall was a recognition of what a typical investment banker is, a gambler effectively, and prepared to do anything to make some extra money. So that piece of legislation was taken out in the late 1990s, and some people, as we've discussed before, are calling for it to come back in now, and Liam Halligan is one of the sort of City of London commentators that is calling for this. But he is also calling for the Pecora Commission.
Right.
Whoops, sorry. And a new Pecora Commission, and what the Pecora Commission was basically, you might say it was a bit like the Treasury Select Committee, except it had teeth, or maybe perhaps it was you'd describe it as a Leveson inquiry for banks, and it took place in the 1930s crash, just as a result of that. Now the Pecora Commission was amazing because it really sort of grabbed the public's awareness of what was going on within banks, and the people doing the investigation had pretty much unlimited powers to do a serious investigation, so it's just quite amazing to see Halligan calling for this as well as Glass-Steagall. But
so we got a little quote from him.
The quote. Well, the quote is referring to Glass-Steagall, and it says, "For a very long time, this column has argued that the 1999 repeal of Glass-Steagall was the single most important cause of the subprime crisis and its related economic fallout. For Weil the man who did more than anything to remove this crucial safeguard is now admitting that he was wrong." So, but the other thing that he said was that for him to call, for Weil to call for splitting the banks is like Colonel Sanders calling for chicken-free diets. So this is really, this is a major about face from somebody absolutely within the financial elites in the United States now calling for Glass-Steagall. Halligan is a fan of Glass-Steagall as well, and going further by calling for this modern day Pecora Commission.
Yeah, we know that viewers and listeners, some have been tracking what we've been talking about, and the UK column's been printing to do with banking for years now. Yeah. But basically, it's obvious to us that many more people are now really starting to pay attention to what's actually happening in the world of finance. And we have this key situation in the country where there isn't money to do all the basics. We're not putting people through skills training. We're not backing up our industrial production. We're not backing farming. So we say, where is the money gone? And it doesn't take too much analysis to start to see that what we've had operating was a cabal within this hedge fund industry. But nobody is getting to grips with it at the moment. We're not seeing Mr. Cameron, we're not seeing George Osborne really get stuck into the banks and where the money's going. What seems to be happening is the other way around. So the banks are dictating what happens in the nation as a whole.
Well, I mean, part of the problem is that the financial system, the casino financial system, it's effectively a closed system in the sense that there is an amount of money in there that various players within that casino are trying to steal from each other. But while that money's sitting in the financial system, it's not being used in the real economy, and it's not available for apprenticeships and for building infrastructure and this kind of thing. So what they're doing is sucking as much cash out of the real economy, privatization of the water system is a key example of that, where they just haven't invested in the water infrastructure. They've been taking all that money out. That goes into the financial system then and is used to gamble with, instead of being used for productive purposes.
Well, we've got a classic example really of what could be done at the moment, but because of course everybody I think is delighted with the success of the British athletes. But when we come and look and we say, well, how has this happened? The athletes themselves have said quite rightly it takes hard work and graft. So they recognise that if you want to achieve success, you've got to work hard and you've got to put the effort in. But of course the other thing that's been happening in the lead up to this Olympics is that money and facilities and capacity has actually been put in behind the Olympic athletes themselves. So we can see that if we looked at the country as a whole and we said, well, how is it at the moment we've got failing areas, whether it's some of the things I've already mentioned, shipbuilding or farming or whatever, money should be put in to actually invest in order to get those areas moving. There's no great magic to it. This is simply coming down to common sense of getting the finance and the backing and the training into the areas that it's needed. So Mr. Cameron seems to be able to recognise this with Olympic athletes, but when it comes down to actually getting thousands of young people into proper jobs by proper skills training, apprenticeships, and giving them the training and the skills they need, he suddenly can't understand it.
Well, what's been fascinating me about his recent comments is that he's pushing the success of the Olympic team as if his job's done. We've had our success. We invested in the Olympic team. They're successful. We don't need to do any more. Is more or less what he seems to be saying.
Well, he's leaving it to the national lottery. So perhaps we should get the national.
No, but I'm referring to these other areas.
Oh right, yeah.
This is it. His job's done. We've got our 29 medals, and we don't need to do any more. We don't need to create jobs because the country's feeling good.
Absolutely. Well, if we bring up another gentleman at the moment, and I think this is quite an interesting one. We've got a few minutes to go, but here we've got Michael Howard, the former Tory leader, and he's been speaking out in the Telegraph today, and I'll just put his quote on screen because it's so interesting. He says that Learjets, Swiss bank accounts, corrupt dictators, allowing taxpayers' aid to be spent on these things is abhorrent. The British people shouldn't stand for it. Happily, they don't need to. Now, seen on its own, you would have thought that Michael Howard was talking about the state of British politics and the Tory party and Cameron's administration, or perhaps he's referring to Mr. Blair flying around the world. But no, Michael Howard is not dealing in the reality of what's going on in the corruption of British politics at the moment. All of a sudden, following the Olympics, the subject is of feeding people. And what he's saying is that we now need a massive campaign following the Olympics in order to deal with the 170 million children worldwide that are not being fed properly. Now, of course, we all feel for those children, but the question is, what is actually causing this starvation and poverty in the world? And I think we can track part of it back to the very banking system that we've been talking about in the rest of the show. You've got some comments on it.
At the weekend there was an article again in the Mail which said, on the trail of the land grabbers, the British imperialists snapping up swathes of Africa to cash in on the world's food shortage and forcing out small farmers. And basically they were highlighting, well, it was actually an article written by an author of a new book, and the book is called The Land Grabbers, and it's by a guy called Fred Pearce, who wrote this article in the Mail. And what he's highlighting is ex-head of the British Armed Forces, Sir Charles Redmond Watt, who's got involved with some various Chinese billionaires and Saudi sheikhs and various other Wall Street people, and set up a shell company in Las Vegas. Strange place to set up a shell company, you might think, so perhaps he's dodging tax there, I don't know. But they are buying up large areas of African farmland and basically bringing in their factory farming techniques, probably you could say that they're employing people on slave wages,
Yeah.
and attempting to corner to produce large quantities of food and take advantage of the high prices in the food market, which have come about as a direct result of the policy of infrastructure collapse right across the world. So again, we've got effectively another scam going on here, where the government policy worldwide has been to allow farming infrastructure to collapse. That's created a shortage of food globally, pushed the prices up. We've also got hedge fund manipulation going on, and then we've got these clowns going in and effectively stealing land from Africans in order to produce food at inflated prices.
Yeah. So we're coming full circle here, but essentially we can see what's causing the problem. So Michael Howard here being totally disingenuous, we've got to focus on aid, we've got to help these people, when in fact the best way we can help these people is by getting these entrepreneurs, these corporations and the banks off their backs and let them function as African
Absolutely,
nations.
and of course the other thing is that aid never comes without strings attached.
Yeah.
Aid is another part of the scam for asset stripping these countries.
Yeah, and of course we've also got another political agenda going on in Africa at the moment, which is the regionalisation of Africa, and that's fully tied in as part of the European policy, in that Africa is to join the European supranational state. That's the plan. So at the moment we can see the political agitation already taking place in the African states, and it's no surprise, I think, that we're seeing this type of appalling hunger. So perhaps Mr. Michael Howard might like to look a little bit deeper than aid. I just wanted to flag up two last things. We've overrun as usual, but we're allowed to do it because it's UK Column Live. And the Express put up an article today which is talking about thousands of job centre staff going on strike in a long-running row over oppressive working conditions and unrealistic targets. This is an interesting subject because a number of people have been contacting the column to report about their experiences in job centres, and we know that over the last few years the job centre staff have appeared to be particularly harassed, and that has changed their behaviour, because in some cases they've become quite sort of demeaning of people who've arrived in the search for work. And now we're starting to understand that, of course, the whole process of helping people back into work is being manipulated and interfered with, which is causing problems for the job centre staff themselves. So I think we're going to watch this one for future reports. We'll end on the note that having got all of this mayhem and chaos in operation, of course, Mr. Cameron and Clegg are off on holiday. They're going to Spain. I don't suppose that they'll be visiting the families who are currently unemployed, or the some 45, or is it 50% of young people who are now unemployed in Spain as a result of the EU economic and financial policy. I suspect they'll be on the beach. And Mr. Miliband has also gone abroad. He's gone to Greece, and I believe that he will go there to fully appreciate now what it's like to be in a country which is totally run by European bankers. So well done, Mr. Miliband. That brings us to the end of the show today. Thank you very much for joining us. We hope you'll tune in again tomorrow at 12 o'clock for UK Column Live. Thank you very much.